So I'm here in Harvard, and I want to talk to students about what they think about getting in Harvard, what they think about their school, and what they think about education in general. So let's find out.
It's such a big place that it's kind of choose your own adventure. There's so many opportunities and different resources that it's kind of staggering the amount of choice that you have here, which is both good and also overwhelming sometimes.
Like a burden, basically.
If only because you're always aware of the opportunity cost of the things you could be doing, but there's only so many hours in a day.
So I think that like any myth, it has some grain of truth to it, that in general it is true that Harvard students are like wealthier than the general population on average, but I don't think that it's necessarily true. So for example, 20% of our students pay nothing at all to be here. They're on full financial aid, full scholarship. So Harvard does a pretty good job to promote diversity in its recruitment and its admissions, so it certainly does not preference a certain kind of student. But I think that often wealthier students or more athletic students are better prepared to apply to Harvard before they come here. But Harvard certainly does try hard to make sure that it's accessible to sort of anyone who has the ability and wants the education.
I can only speak to myself, and I'm a refugee, immigrant, grew up in a low-income family. My parents still they just moved into public housing in New York, so they're low-income. I came in as a doctoral student from the City University of New York, so I received free tuition when I was at CUNY, and when I came here I was fully funded as a doctoral student. They took care of me, and even now my tuition is paid for, and anything that's additional I teach. There's great opportunities, so I think that's true for some, but it's definitely not true for all. I think the school is trying harder to get more students like myself.
The living costs are the really hard part about this. Just Boston and Cambridge are very expensive places to live. If you look at just the tuition, it's at least for the divinity school, relatively, it's not so bad. But the cost of an apartment here is staggering.
Wow.
And there's only so much Harvard can do about that, More graduate housing, I guess, would be nice, but...
Right, so currently we have around a 5% acceptance rate, so that's 40,000 applicants, about 2,000 acceptances. It's fairly difficult, but the way Harvard does admissions, it does it in what they call a holistic process, which means that they look at all aspects of your education and your background. So it's difficult, but if you are, at the top of your class, wherever you come from, even if it's some sort of underperforming school, they are, not comparing you to every other student here. They're comparing you to, your particular social context. So it's difficult to get into Harvard, but not impossible by any means for anyone.
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated. I think there's definitely what Harvard calls legacy students, and these are students that come in because their families have, for a long period of time, come to Harvard, and those students do exist. And then I think they are doing these outreach methods. I'm not quite sure on the college level how that works. On the graduate level, it's a little probably more diverse than on the college level, I think. One thing I'll say, though, is Harvard can definitely do better bringing in domestic students. I think that's probably one of the issues when it comes to how do you look at wealth and diversity. I think a lot of students at Harvard, while they may come in from different countries, that doesn't necessarily add to diversity. Sometimes you need to bring in more domestic students as well, whether people of color especially, and also, like I mentioned before, I'm from Azerbaijan, and there aren't really that many people from Eastern Europe, especially in certain schools. It's very siloed,
I mean, there's certainly a mixture of both. There are people who've had a lot of advantages and a lot of wealth and resources. They could always be doing better as far as making it not just like accessible, but also actively recruiting people who don't come from that background. And there's a lot of my classmates from whom I've learned the most and are doing just incredible work. I don't know, I'm often more impressed by people who didn't take this sort of mythical Harvard route into it. I think the Div School is always doing better. They could be doing more, but about making that road open and trying to recognize the financial sacrifices that come with affording school at a place like this.
So absolutely, I think the majority of people here come from public schools. That's just because the majority of people in the United States go to public schools, and I think certainly I think private schools are slightly overrepresented here compared to the general population, but I would say that there's no barrier to entry that would prevent someone from a public school from coming to Harvard. Public schools in the United States obviously vary greatly, and that has a lot to do with local funding. So because our public schools are generally funded locally, richer neighborhoods will have better public schools. And that's a challenge that, that's a huge political challenge. That's not something that, Harvard can directly influence. But certainly there are a wide range of public schools that can equip you well for coming to Harvard. I'm personally from the public school system. I went to my local public school, and it wasn't any problem in the admissions process. I felt like I was very well prepared. Of course, the United States also has charter schools, which are public, but can have specialized curriculums, and those often are the sorts of schools that people at Harvard will come from. Charter schools are public magnet schools that have tests to get in sometimes, but they're still public. They're publicly funded.
Oh, pretty cool.
Well, this is Strawman. Strawman is promoting a new course, and it's looking for 20 brilliantly creative students for ES20, and this is a course specifically around creativity and creation. So we're trying to create a course that doesn't just tell students how to create a company or how to start a business. We're literally trying to teach students how to create, and we are looking for creative students in particular, but that can be anyone. But we've actually already almost reached our cap because
Wow.
there's been quite a lot of excitement about the course, and it's a combination of engineering and design.
Why Strawman though?
Why a Strawman? Well, I mean, I can't quite answer that question. I think the beauty is in the ambiguity of it. But the Strawman, and that's capital S, capital M. It's not male or female, but the Strawman can really be anyone, and I think it's a good representation of kind of what education currently looks like at Harvard. It's are we simply is this like the model student, quote unquote? Is this the future student of Harvard? Are we churning students out just as straw people, quote unquote? That could be
Strawmanning applications. I don't know.
Yeah, you can come up
analogy,
you can come up with as many. I honestly don't care much for my personal meaning. I think it'll touch people differently, and you could look at it from an environmental perspective. You can like pollution. You can look at it in any perspective, really, and also the current administration here in the U.S. I mean, people I think will take away whatever they want to take away from it.
Yeah.